Three things my business mentor has taught me. Now, this is about 3 or 4 years ago. I had the chance to sit down with a stakeholder with the golf club that I was working with, just about some general advice in business. Now, this isn't about any strategy or tactics about making money. It actually might surprise you. First piece of advice that he gave me was don't drink. Ironically as it sounds, he was actually drinking a glass of his favorite scotch. He knew that. He said, Denzel, I know I'm drinking a scotch, but I need to wind down from a busy day. His advice was not using a substance such as alcohol as a crutch for the work. I'm quite lucky that I don't have a taste for alcohol nor an addiction to it. Noting my one side of my family, my father's side of the family predisposition to alcohol usage. In seeing that, it's making me choose to go, I want the work itself to be self-sustaining. It also has, again, health impacts. Although he didn't mention this explicitly, I think sitting down with me, the context that I was still in high school is alcohol is a poison. Like when you're younger, you're probably much more equipped to handle the poison and get it out of your system. But as you get older, the effects of alcohol tend to become exponential with greater age. Then another thing that wasn't talked about by my mentor in that conversation, but now that I've learned later, is about in terms of productivity, particularly from Alex Hormozi. That being when you, again, I don't know from personal experience because I have never gone drunk or never gone out drinking. Essentially, you spend one day doing the drinking, and then the next day recovering. In order to drink, you're actually costing yourself 2 days. The day you drink, and then the next day to recover. Especially for people who want to get ahead or move forward or do something productive. Alcohol tends to be the saboteur to that productivity because you're having to do an activity that is actively poisoning you, also hindering your future, being the next day, ability to cognitively perform. Then you might be saying, what about in moderation? Sure, I have close friends that are able to drink, but they don't drink copious amounts of alcohol. But you have to understand the context that if you live in a society where main social activities revolve around this one substance, it becomes very hard for individuals prone to addiction or prone to drinking to stop drinking. Looping back to him saying it's another expense that isn't necessary or actually is a hindrance to your ability to want to grow and create wealth. Probably the last point on alcohol is appearance. Again, my mentor didn't mention this. Some of these points are like core points from him and then additions from me. Alcohol doesn't do any good in terms of your appearance, particularly personally about individuals like after high school because they tend to drink almost weekly or daily. They become fatter, pudgier, and develop a beer belly. And when you're someone whose works, if you're wanting to go into high income stuff like sales or marketing, it tends to be person or forward facing, and it's actually in your best interest to be the best looking appearance that you can be in terms of health, because generally your health and your appearance can indicate or have other people assume what it took to create. For example, working out. Why is a strong physique so desired? Because it's not that easy to attain, and part of that, well, it's quite ironic because most of the people that go to the gym and within my friend group still drink. None of them don't abstain from alcohol. Being able to show that you are disciplined in your alcohol intake, your ability to have a diet, your ability to maintain regime and physical activity, it will open up so many more doors simply because of something called the halo effect. As shallow and vain as it sounds, the more attractive you are, the more positively perceived you are by other people. Also back to Alex Hormozi, he puts it in the context of, particularly in young men, put them in a room full of young men who are in shape, disciplined, have a correct sleep schedule, don't take drugs, don't take alcohol, and then compete against a group of men that do the exact opposite, drink alcohol, not physically in shape, unattractive, undisciplined. Who's going to be competing better? Point number 2 that my mentor made was don't gamble. Okay, this is going to be for the skeptics. Those who will be asking, what's the difference between gambling versus investing? Because it's quite easy to not make the differentiation between gambling and investing. I want to say, in terms of casino terms, it's who is the house. This is very different to games such as poker and to an extent blackjack. You're competing with other players or a dealer, and that's a game rather than pure chances or probabilities. Who is the house? When you go into the casino, when you play slots, if you play along a long enough time horizon, it's the house is going to win. But in terms of outside of business and investing, you can become the house. How so? It's in terms of your skills, judgment, and knowledge. And all these three things are within your control. So when you walk into that casino, in terms of chances and odds, you can't directly affect them. They're sort of given to you. And what my mentor wanted to make the point to me is not gambling with odds that aren't in your control, and especially a vice such as gambling. A lot of money can be wasted towards chasing after something that won't come into fruition. Like that classic meme says, 99% of gamblers quit before they hit it big. And rather than scoping from an individualistic perspective in terms of gambling, he also shared towards having a family, particularly with people who are dependent on you, on your income and your ability to earn money. He made the point to me that if I was to go into business or going to make an investment, he said to me, don't, for example, bet it against the mortgage, because that mortgage is a roof over people's heads that I care about, and they shouldn't be roped into my bets and base the consequences of my decisions. So that's sort of the larger scope of growth versus security. I'm sure that Gary Vee mentions in his content all the time, if you're like 20 to 30, like go all out, go crazy, like go take the massive risks, because you don't actually have anything to lose. But once you start having a family, start having a house, children, a wife, a partner, you start having things to lose, and you can't make those big bets on yourself or make those large investments. Probably when you get older, it's the same with like investment portfolios. The earlier your age, the more riskier the bets, but the more you're closing towards retirement, the more safer and more secure the bets are or investments are. And you can't be growth orientated when you have people who are dependent on you. You're probably more driven by security. The third point that my mentor raised with me, and that was don't take drugs. You might see the common theme now with vices. I think at this point, if I remember it correctly, it was like very short, sharp, simple. Again, I've never done any drugs in my life outside of like medicinal drugs. And if we're going off by the definition of a substance that changes your mental state, anything can be considered a drug, even food. To elaborate on this simple principle to live by, I remember like this one talk in grade 10 or 11 where this ex-meth addict came given a talk to the students of our cohort. Essentially, like methamphetamine like is one of those drugs where only 1% or 10%, such as like a small percentage of addicts actually recover. And he'd tell stories of literally being paranoid, like looking outside the window, waiting for like someone to come. And he would have like sell literally all of his possessions just to get his next fix. When it comes to taking drugs, it elaborates on that idea of operating from a place of lack. Don't tend to make the best decisions if we're needing something or we're wanting a next fix. What would the quality of decisions you would be making if you were under the effect of drugs? This next point, he actually didn't mention in our talk, because I remember vividly there were 3 things, but I might add this as a question mark. Bonus fourth point is smoking. This particular mentor of mine, he actually did smoke cigars, so the classic Scotch and cigar smoker and drinker. I've made videos in the past where I mentioned about wanting to smoke cigars rather than cigarettes, but looking at it in this current season of my life, I'm not wanting to like develop a nicotine addiction. Again, I haven't done extensive research. Probably the most extensive research I've done is like listening to our Andrew Huberman podcast about nicotine. I definitely know my family history in terms of smoking. My grandfather actually suffered a stroke from his years of smoking. But again, it's one of those decisions you have to make where is it a net positive using said drug? Like nicotine is a drug as well. So the concluding statement, like to wrap around all these 3 things about alcohol, gambling, drugs, nicotine, all of this revolves around the idea of spending money. Yeah, it revolves around spending money. My mentor has mentioned to me, if I can avoid these strings plus that's by me, I will be much richer and wealthier because I have more money left over to spend or invest in other things. Because quite simply, you want to know the equation to wealth. Wealth, all it is income minus expenses. That's all it is. And if you can increase that guy and then decrease this guy by definition will increase. If these things aren't mostly net negatives in terms of your life and your bank account, sit down with yourself and go, Am I willing to sacrifice my vices and change myself in order to have more of this, which for some people is freedom or even security? Yes, do live in the moment. Yes, be present. But sometimes you have to go, if my present self will be my future self, do I want to give my future self the best possible position by having more of this stuff and less of this stuff? That's sort of the question you have to ask yourself. So essentially, what my mentor has taught me is don't do anything that takes money away from you and doesn't give you a net positive, because those things are called liabilities, and things that make you money are assets.